Welcome to the Big Idea podcast, where we focus on food. Today we're going to be talking to the CTO and co-founder of Innocent Meats, Patrick Nonnenmacher. Patrick is based in Germany, and this is the first cell-based and cultured meat company based in Germany. They're doing some amazing things. Love to get you into the conversation and get your feedback and comments. Look forward to it. Let's get into the conversation. Bye. Okay, Patrick, welcome to the Big Idea podcast, where we focus on food. You are a co-founder of Innocent Meat. I'm not sure if that's a question or a statement, but it's probably a bit of both. How are you today, sir?
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having the opportunity to take part in the podcast. I'm feeling very good today, being busy in the morning, visiting shortly the lab, talking to all the colleagues, and then going back to the office where most of the time my day is taking part.
Awesome. So you said go back to the lab, and I've talked about Innocent Meat. Why don't we let people know what it is that you guys do?
Yes, of course. Basically, we are the first German cultured meat company. So we try to make meat in a different way. So we take out the tissue of the animals and expand it outside of them to create real meat, just made in a different way.
I think that's one of the best explanations I've ever heard for cell-based or cultured meat. Nice and simple. So you basically take the tissues of the animal, you take it outside of the animal, and then you grow it. You grow real meat in a different way. Awesome. Why bother? I know I've probably asked this question hundreds of times, but why do you bother? Why does Innocent Meat care about this?
Innocent Meat has hard to start about that question. We have so many reasons. Basically, to be honest, one of the main points that caught me in the beginning was the scientific interest. I have been my whole life kind of a scientist, investigating things when I was small and a child, doing that through my whole life. And then I came across this idea and thought, okay, this is something really changing everything I know, really getting into state-of-the-art technology and science. And then I got more into detail and learned more about that topic and learned how much good influences this kind of project has to the world compared to sustainability, to climate change, which is really driving us here. But of course, making changes to food system, changing the systems conventional meat is produced right now, concerning about animal rights. So it's really hard to find one point why we are doing this, but there's so many, and it is hard to explain that in a short time period.
So you mentioned science was what got you into it in the first place. Should people be nervous or scared about the fact that science is what's driving this kind of area of meat production or food production? I mean, I guess some people sort of have this imaginary view of food being this this happy smiling animal in a field somewhere that lives a very long and happy life grazing, and then one day it has a pretty terrible day, and that's how we get our meat. And does science have a role to play? Has science always had a role to play, and we just don't get that? I mean, is this something we should be scared of? There's a lot in there, so by all means, pick any one of those questions you like.
I try my best to summarize it up. Basically, a long question put into short. I don't think that anybody has to be scared, neither of cultured meat in general, nor of the whole topic of science. Science is something that is in our lives everywhere, every day. I have been studying a long time about plant biochemistry, and basically there had been times when I was watching a tree and was stunned by what is happening inside. In every leaf, there's happening so much science. The conversion of carbon dioxide into into oxygen and living material. Basically, we are surrounded by science so much and every day, and also thinking about everyday situations or where customers are confronted with science, like genetically modified food, for example. A lot of people are afraid, for example, for GMO food, but
there's a lot of people super anti GMO, and are you going to tell me now? And I'd love you to, one way or the other, but are you going to tell me now that they shouldn't be?
No, definitely. This is a tough discussion, and I would never tell anyone to be not afraid of anything, because I think being anxious, being afraid is the right of every single person, and it's just our business as scientists to really inform them, to give them all the information they need, that they don't be too afraid. No, don't be in need to be afraid, kind of. But we have, for example, just in that example, the situation that a lot of people are even afraid of. Okay, please don't put genomes or DNA into my food. But this is just a misconception of information, because in every living food, like vegetable or meat itself, of course, there is included DNA, because it's inside the genetical material. This is why this food is existing. So also inside of a normal apple, you find DNA, you find the science that is necessary for living organisms. And it's exactly the same for cultured meat, for example. You have the real animals walking outside there, moving because of the muscles they have inside their tissue. And basically this muscle tissue is made of single muscle cells. And this is bringing me back to the topic of cultured meat. We're extracting these single cells from the animal, expanding them and making them back into muscle fibers, which are existing in the animals. So it's just outside of the animal. And if I would show you a sliced out muscle from that animal, it would be really tough when you see it under a microscope, for example, for you to decide, was this really from the animal or is it created in our lab? So there is no natural occurring difference in between that. So one could argue, should you be afraid of that because it was made in the lab, because you're not familiar to the lab itself, or should you be open-minded because it's basically the exact same material? But this is up to everyone else.
So just to kind of summarize at least my understanding, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, under the microscope, cultured meat or cell-based meat that you guys can create in the lab is identical to the meat and the cells and the fibers that exist in a standard, regular, everyday, ordinary animal.
Yes, it basically is. You can really see when you, for example, add extracellular signals like electrocurrency, you can see that muscle pumping. There are even sections when we look to our meat under the microscope where you can see the cells spontaneously pulsing like a real muscle, and they are doing that by themselves, because it's really a living organism that you see inside there.
Wow. So, and you've talked about making it in a lab. Should we be envisioning, as we sort of move towards a cell-based or a cultured meat production industry, that there's just going to be lots of people in white coats sort of running around with petri dishes and test tubes and things making our food now? How does that making in a lab scale to making this food in the kind of quantities that make a difference to a more sustainable world?
Yes, this is a very, very good question. And it seems to be that not many people out there have the exact correct answer or the exact vision how that could look like. This is something that Innocent Meat drove also from the very beginning, because scalability is, for a long time, there's cell-based meat and the idea of it out there, but scalability is up to now still the biggest issue. So this is something we wanted to address from the beginning, and it also was kind of included in our kind of business idea behind what we're doing. So in the end, what Innocent Meat is trying to do to develop a holistic bioprocess, which includes the cells, a hardware, and processing it from the cell to the final meat product. But we don't want to produce that, as you said, here with white coats in our lab behind hidden doors. We want to hand that process to the meat processors themselves because they know what they need for a product. They want to produce sausages or ham, which you have in your daily life, and they know exactly what they need in kind of a raw product. So they won't wear lab coats and lab glasses and running around. So basically, they are working as food processors. So they may be wearing a hairnet or something, like you're familiar with every butcher, for example, and everything else will be automated in a complete closed system, which could be maybe best compared to a brewery. You have a big tank and that is a closed system. Nobody puts his finger inside and licks it or something. So it has to be sterile, but the coworkers are completely normal coworkers as in every fabric.
So it's more like a brewery than it is a lab when you actually get to scale. That's what you anticipate, right? And Innocent Meat has focused from the beginning on not just can you do the science, but how do you turn that science into a scalable business model that you can work with and pass to food producers?
Yes, exactly.
So one thing that I wanted to just touch on, you talked about a sterile environment, not having a person lick their finger and put it into a barrel or something. I know that the industry previously called cell-based or cultured meat clean meat. And from what I understand, they were calling it clean meat because this is a way of producing identical meat and at a cellular level to traditional meat. But with traditional meat, you need to, feed the animal antibiotics to make sure it's disease-free. You need to ultimately slaughter the animal, which involves a lot of blood and potentially feces and other kind of other aspects of killing and butchering an animal, whereas producing it, as you say, within sort of almost like a brewery type environment, a sterile brewery type environment, you're less likely to get the pathogens and the cross contamination of the butchering process into the meat production. Well, it's not less likely; it just doesn't happen. You don't butcher the animal, you're growing the meat cells. So it could actually be considered to be a much cleaner, much sort of a process that's less likely to have challenges from a pathogen or a cross contamination or a drug in the food system kind of approach, right?
Yes, definitely. This is something we are also pointing out very, very often. I received a very interesting question during a presentation that I gave last week. And that was basically from a meat processor because he asked, okay, how is the shelf life of the final product? This is something we are taking seriously into consideration because basically the meat that we are producing never saw a single bacterium or fungus in its complete life, because otherwise we would grow more bacteria than cells. We would definitely notice that from a second. And if you imagine packing a completely sterile product, drying it or maybe just vacuumize it, you could store that kind of a meat inside of a storage room at room temperature in the corner and leave it there for weeks. Do that with normal meat and you would definitely have a problem.
I'd actually never considered that. You're right. It's completely sterile. It shouldn't. Well, I don't know. You still get, everything has half-lives, right? Everything gets a time where it sort of deteriorates because of, just the passing of time. But how much of that sort of deterioration of food is based on bacteria and related, and how much of it is just the passing of time? So did you have an answer for him in terms of how long your meat will last versus traditional meat?
Sadly, we hadn't yet the chance to analyze it in detail.
So no,
So
the
it's
answer's
more of
no.
an estimation I'm giving you here. I have to admit that honestly.
Sure.
But we're pretty sure a lot of the degradation processes and fouling processes are related to microorganisms. Of course, there are oxidation processes which are related to temperature or sunlight, for example. But if you really exclude, for example, oxygen out of the process, for example, you vacuumize the sterile product in a darkened kind of box, there shouldn't be a lot degradation. I wouldn't guarantee you that you could store it there for years in just a corner. But basically, this is also not our idea of the process, as when we're handing our complete bioprocess to the meat processors, they can basically manufacture their raw product in production hall A, transport it to production hall B without any logistics. So you don't need to have trucks and trains driving around through your whole country, and they process it there directly to sausages. Of course, their meat processing machines, they are not used to be sterile. It's an open kind of turning thing. You throw the meat in there, it get mixed, you throw in salts and all the ingredients and make your sausage. From that point, it won't be sterile anymore. So from that time on, you will definitely have a usual kind of shelf life. We're pretty sure about that. But it was just something that kept us interested. What would be the shelf life of a sterile packed material? And we definitely think we would have a benefit. And we definitely think that there's no need for antibiotics that you mentioned beforehand. There is no chance that you could get any kind of pathogen, for example, BSE or something like that. So that are several benefits that we have there in the cell-based meat.
Unless the original cells that you guys source have some of those kind of components in them one way or another. Patrick, I think your video is freezing for some reason.
Yes, my internet had a short breakup, sorry. I think I'm back.
Okay, let's try it. So apologies for everyone. We won't edit this out just because, I don't know, it's the real thing. Let's just do the real thing, and hope you guys appreciate it. Okay, so just to follow up, I guess that means we have the potential one day to create all of our meat and our seafood and all those sorts of elements, or all of those types of foods rather, without any form of bacteria, without any form of microbes, etc. I wonder if we need them. I wonder if in our microbiome we actually benefit in some way from having some of these sort of components within our food. I guess it's a bit like, if we live in a bubble our entire lives, eventually when we're let out of the bubble, I think we'd probably get the flu, the common cold, the measles, and probably every other thing within about 15 minutes of setting foot outside of that completely, sterile bubble, and probably explode or something. And not really, but you get the point I'm making. So I love the idea of, a cell-based meat. Do we need some of these things in it, or is the expectation that we actually don't, and having a completely sterile meat is a good thing?
I think having the completely sterile meat is more a good thing. I'm definitely sure that having probiotic bacteria inside of the food can be beneficial. But most studies I have seen is that not a lot of these probiotic biomes are actually getting into your gut where they help. So basically you're pretty much fixed to your microbiome you're having in there just from the environment that you're giving it with your whole life situation. It can change drastically. If you're taking antibiotics a lot or stop moving at all, for example, your microbiome is noticing that, and it will change its behavior and its composition due to that, but not that much to what kind of bacteria you're eating. The other point that I would mention to that maybe is, of course, we would never suggest someone hey, just eat the rest of your life only cell-based meat. I would always suggest you to eat sometimes maybe an apple or a banana or something else, and not only eat meat at all, even if it's not only cultured meat. I wouldn't also suggest to eat just conventional meat and nothing else. So I think you have definitely the chance to get in contact with bacteria and fungus that you would like to have.
All right. So let's now go into the business side of things. You mentioned Innocent Meat is the first German cell-based or cultured meat company. When did you guys get started? How many people in the company? Who are the sort of key people in the company today? I wonder if you can give us a little bit of background on Innocent Meat.
Yes, of course, happy to do that. Basically, it took a while, quite a long journey to be here today. I think we started, or basically I came first across Innocent Meat 4.5 years ago, I would say. It was in April 2017. And then back in that time, I was just finishing my studies here, was sitting on packed luggage to move for my PhD to Switzerland. And back at that time, I met Laura for the first time, and she came up with that cool idea of, hey, I have heard about that cell-based meat, and she has more the business and IT background. And I was a biochemist back in that days. I still am, of course. And she asked me to help her. Where can I find intelligent people that could show me how to start all that? Because I want to do that definitely. And I said, okay, let me see in my network. Let me see if I can give you some insights, can give you help in the beginning. So I read into it and pretty fast came to that idea. Okay, this is way more interesting than what I want to do in Zurich there. So I pretty fast noticed I had to cancel that, what I did. And since that, I stayed with the team. I stayed with Laura. So the team was just Laura and I back in the beginning. So she was responsible for looking for investments, making all the organizational stuff. What do you need to open up a lab in Germany, all the registration stuff. And I was writing the scientific planning. So how will we do everything? What should we do when? And also the scientific network. We are working with a lot of partners, with a lot of great partners here in Rostock and around the world, basically, to make our vision come true. And this is what we did then for more than 3 years during our usual jobs. So both of us have been working during day and during night. We became kind of the innocent meat drivers, passionate, doing what we love. And finally, we had the chance to meet you guys too, and came across Big Idea Ventures that gave us really the opportunity to start with the accelerator, moving into the labs of the University of Rostock, where we really got to keep the things rolling, got into the lab, isolated our first cells, showed that we are really capable of that project, and showed pretty fast good results. And till today, we're running, very happy with our project schedules. Meanwhile, we are 4 researchers in total, and still Laura is running the complete business on her own. Very impressive what she can do the whole day. That's a lot of fun to watch her there, and we're a pretty cool team. We're having fun every day, I guess. At least they say to me. Maybe it's already the side of, okay, he's my boss, I have to be nice to him. But we're enjoying every day basically here, enjoying the chance that we get, that we really can make a change to the food industry, to the systems, bringing all our ideas into. We're hiring 3 more researchers for 2022. So expanding the team, getting more projects, more collaborations with partners from universities to really accelerate the projects we have.
So you mentioned your business model is not just, can you manufacture or can you create cell-based meat? We've had a number of companies throughout the world now prove that it can be done. we've had that sort of aha moment and our hand waving in the air and running down the street semi-naked. We've kind of done that already. Now we're sort of, and I know that this is Innocent Meat's focus, now we're driving towards how do we turn that into something that can positively impact the world? How do we scale it so that, we can create meat in a more sustainable way? What are some of the challenges that you guys are grappling with now, or have grappled with, since the beginning, as you move from can you do it to how do you scale it?
Yes, there are several factors. I would say when you talk about scalability, it's mostly related to the buyer process. So the cells, everybody showed you can handle them, you can expand them, you can differentiate them in small scales. So the cell system is something where you also can't change a lot. So basically the cells are the cells, and you could of course modify them genetically, and then they can do everything you want. They could glow in the dark if you like to, but nobody's interested in that, of course.
Don't say that. Don't skip. Like you're going to have people taking that one sentence out of your entire interview and going crazy over it. Come on now, bring it back to normality.
I promise we won't do that. We won't do that. No, we're just kidding. Basically, the buyer process is the thing what concerned us the most in the beginning, and it starts basically for us with scaffolding. So basically, most of the cells that the cell-based meat industry is using are so-called adherency-dependent cells. So they need to grow on a surface. Basically, what scientists did during the last decades is growing them on plastic surfaces and coating them with specific proteins, which the cells know from the connective tissue in our bodies, and they grow on that. But if you imagine you want to grow gigatons of cells, which we would like to grow for meat industry, on two-dimensional plastic platforms, you would need a lot of space to grow these cells. So this is not applicable. So the challenge we have in the industry is to create as much surface as possible in the smallest volume. And this is kind of the scaffolding idea that drives all the cell-based meat companies. And there's nothing out there that is used in pharma technology, for example, because this is where a lot of technology is coming from, because basically they're cultivating cells since several years and decades already. So we're using a lot of technology from them. So this is something we have addressed quite early and put our effort into to create kind of edible carriers that can remain in the product, and we can grow cells on them in huge masses, and we can throw them basically into every bioreactor that is produced around the world. So this was something that we have been very concerned, but we happily made our first prototype products that work very, very good for our processes. And the next part of the process is then the bioreactors itself. So we talked about kind of breweries in the beginning, where you have these huge tanks where you can put a lot of liquid in and mix it, which basically a bioreactor is. You have kind of a closed system which you can heat to the temperature you would love to have. For example, for us, it's most of the time 37 degrees, like we have in our body, like animals have it in their body. You want to supply them with all the gases they like, for example, oxygen, CO2, and nitrogen. You can really coordinate the gas consumption inside there. You can kind of pour media in and pour media out in a sterile way. And you can have a closed buffer system, so the pH value doesn't change inside of that. So basically, these are the main drivers you have in the bioreactor. And just technically, it wouldn't be an issue to build that as big as you would like. Of course, you have more energy costs to mix that liquid inside and to heat it up, but the dimensions just change. So usually, what I mean with dimensions is you compare the cell, which is always the same size, to the surrounding system. So is the wall, are both walls very close to it, or are they very far away? And if you, for example, are mixing the liquid inside of it, you have a wave. And how is that wave compared in its dimension, and how is the strength this wave is applying to the cell compared in the different sizes of the bioreactor? And so this is a real big issue which all the industry is facing. And especially if you're looking to conventional bioreactor systems, which are most often steered bioreactor tanks. So you have a stirrer inside of it, which you can basically compare to an impeller from a motorboat. So you wouldn't put your hand inside of that. So it's not the best idea to put a very sensitive cell inside of that. So that's also very, very harmful and something we have to consider. So we also took our brain a lot into the idea, okay, which kind of bioreactor could we use? And there are pretty cool stuff out there. So we don't have to invent everything from the scratch. And so we decided to use existing technology that is fitting to our needs. And that is already scalable to several thousand liters. And so we decided to use that and just outscale kind of. So making more of these bioreactors and put in a production plant in that way.
So one of the assumptions I've made, and I think other people make, is that our ability to scale this technology to a size which makes it feasible is driven by cost. In other words, the growth factor traditionally, or the growth serum has traditionally been FBS. FBS was an ingredient or a chemical, I don't know how you'd like to describe it, but was used as in the pharmaceutical industry and was quite expensive in very, very small quantities. So the ability to scale the cell-based or the cultured meat industry is going to be expensive if we need huge quantities of this growth serum. In addition, bioreactors are typically quite expensive, and you're capped in terms of what can be produced over what time period based on the number of liters a bioreactor is. And that, from what I understand, is the key measure of sort of size from a bioreactor perspective. Every time, and when I started getting involved in the industry, which was a little while ago now, I sort of asked people, I said, is this a 3-year cycle? Is this a 5-year cycle? How long is it going to be until we're able to produce meat in this way that is cost comparable with the traditional meat industry? And that's an incredible ask, because the meat industry is what they call processing animals in such huge quantities, in such a sort of mechanized, automated way, producing anything, like anything at all, at a price comparable, when you're using that much automation, that much process, that much scale, is just incredibly difficult. They've created an industry over decades, perhaps centuries, that is just optimized like mad, right? So lots of questions there. What are I guess question one is, what are the kind of key constraints from a cost perspective that stop cell-based being commercially viable? I guess that's question one. And question two is it are we still on a 3-year, 5-year horizon, even though I've been in this business now for more than 3 and 5 years and we haven't got there yet? Or is it further out than that, in your opinion? So I don't know which one you want to tackle first, or if you don't want to tackle any of them, just tell me and I'll ask you something completely different. But those are my kind of questions right now.
No, I love that question, kind of. Of course, this is something every discussion about cultured meat is pointing to in the end, and this discussion always comes up, and I'm happy to discuss that, because this is something we're discussing inside of our team on a weekly basis, at least once. So there are a lot of factors, but I would break it down to 2 main drivers for cost in the cultured meat sector, I would say. And first is the cell culture medium. So we have to supply the cells with nutrients and everything they need, and this needs to be reduced drastically. Basically, there are assumptions that 55 to 95% of the complete costs of the final product are related to the cell culture medium. So this is a big span, of course. 55 and 95% is a huge difference, but definitely we can be sure that it will be more than 50%. So that's a major point, definitely. So we have to reduce everything there. But what we see right now is because we are very closely related to the technology from the pharma sector, we're using that as starting material, basically most of the companies. And what you see there is that everything inside of pharmacy products has underwent definite and intensive registration, approval, and testing. So we don't have something like food grade there, we have pharmacy grade. And so every single sugar, like glucose or something you buy for these media is very, very expensive, nothing you get in the grocery. So if we could reduce these costs and related to cost of scales, we could reduce the prices drastically. This is one point we always point out, and this is something we can't do alone, of course. We have to work with all the registration departments there. We have to work with the supply chain there, because this is nothing trivial. If we're talking about gigatons that we want to produce, we need gigatons of all these supplied ingredients we need in the cell culture media later on. And this is nothing easy. You need, of course, also a very good food grade there, so that still the ingredients are as good as you like to have them, basically. The other point in the cell culture media is what you mentioned before. Science used FBS for a very, very long time. And basically it consists of different signaling molecules that the cells need to grow and differentiate into the final tissue. But basically industry decided not to use FBS several years ago because it has several downsides. You have batch-to-batch differences in these different lots. You have high pricing. You have changing prices due to the availability of the material because it's just a byproduct of slaughtering. It's ethical, not very, very positive beside it. And so basically, and it has the possibility to inherit pathogens for human. So we don't want to use that. So pharmacy decided they don't want to use it, and they identified specific factors of the FBS, which is needed for different cell lines, kind of. So not the exact ingredient list is known, but we know which factors we can use, and then they are produced in, for example, bacteria or in fungus or in other cell cultures sometimes even. And that processes are extremely cost intensive. So making cell culture to produce ingredients you want to use for cell culture is not that optimal, I would say. So we decided, for example, to grow them in plants, which is a very, very scalable and cost-effective system, which we have even longer than meat production, basically. So we can really scale that. We modify these plants to produce it, and then we just purify it and make it as cheap as possible. This is one way to reduce the cost of media further.
So a couple of things I'd like to sort of unpack. One is FBS, or fetal bovine serum, is no longer in the cell-based / cultured meat sector the key ingredient to make cells multiply, or it's just you guys?
I would say most of the companies around the world try to get around FBS. I haven't heard of a single company yet that is planning to use it through its whole processes. So when they reach market, we can be pretty sure that there won't be any FBS included in any product.
So it tries to get around that. The companies try to get around it, but have they managed to find a non-animal based alternative that has the efficacy required?
I would say yes. Of course, I can't see in every single company and tell, okay, they did that and they did that, and decide if they did correctly and efficacy. That's not possible. But at least the big players we know, for example, Mosameat out there, huge shout out to these guys doing a great job. They have FBS-free media for their cell lines, and several other cell-based meat companies we are in contact at least have media that are working without FBS. Of course, this is a process that is taking time to make them more efficient, basically, because there's always room for improvement, I would say. We can reach kind of parity to FBS, but there's still room to even improve and make it better than FBS, because FBS is also just, you take FBS, so it's an extract of blood serum of the bovine, and you put that into every cell line. But there are several ingredients in that specific cell line you're using it for is not needing all the material. And so maybe some of these products that are in there are even inhibiting the cells to grow. So you use exact the same product for all cells. This is not optimal. So you can optimize that by deciding which factors are really necessary, and is it maybe beneficial to increase the concentration of one of that and decrease the concentration of the other, and then they are working maybe better together than even in the natural FBS system, because you specify it to your cell line. And this is something we can do which is not there in nature, basically.
So as you guys are focused on the full system, so how to scale cell-based cultured meat, in your opinion, what are the key barriers to scale still today, and what is it very much around the scaffolding that you mentioned previously is what is like the key challenge of scale? Is it the growth factor? Is it the bioreactor, or is it all of the above? Are there things we're not even considering as a challenge which are still part of that issue?
I think scaffolding is one major point, definitely. But there are systems out there, and I believe we have a very good system here already. So this could be something we could really tackle in the close future, to have scaffolds that are working properly to our needs. But of course, then there are a lot of other factors. For bioreactors, definitely there's still a lot of room for improvement. But I would say we should rather focus on process intensification than on scaling the processes just by increasing the size of bioreactors. For example, what I mean by that is cell densities is a very, very specific factor we are interested deeply into. So if you have, for example, a 10,000 liter tank and you're producing one single cell per liter, you're not having big amounts that you can harvest in the end. So you could possibly think, okay, to have more material in the end, I increase the size of my bioreactor from 10,000 liter to 20,000 liters. So I have twice the amount. But if you can increase the density, so the concentration you have 10,000 cells, 10 million cells, up to 200 million cells, which we are aiming for basically, you can really increase the amount of tissue you can produce, the amount of product you can use without increasing the footprint of your machines. So you can really intensify your processes, increase the yield. This is something we have to consider. And these are the processes we are focusing a lot to really reach these very, very high cell densities in a reproducible manners. And then when we achieve that, we can increase the volumes we can produce by putting more machines next to each other that are highly efficient. This is the approach we are using.
Fantastic. I also asked the question of, when I first got into this space, which now is I think five or six or maybe even 7 years ago, something like that. I was asking the thought leaders at the time, how long until we can scale to commercial viability? How long until cell-based is in the marketplace? And at the time, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was told 3 to 5 years. And it's been, 7 years since then, and we're not there yet. And that this happens. The funny thing is, I ask people today, just generally every so often, how long is it going to be? And I get 3 to 5 years as the answer. I don't know why those numbers are the ones people tend to pick when asked something like this. I could ask you, but for God's sake, don't tell me 3 to 5 years. I mean, actually, you can tell me whatever you like. But from your point of view, given that you guys are specifically focused on the system and how to make the system work at scale, and ultimately give this system or work with or sell this system to meat producers, to give them new ways of producing meat for their customers and so on. Are you anticipating that this is a 3 to 5 year cycle, or is it more likely to be a little bit longer than that?
Yes, it really depends highly on what you see as reaching the market. So we truly believe, I'm very sorry for telling the numbers, but in 2025, we aim for our first pilot plant to put that at the site of our first partner at a meat processor. So they can produce kind of thousands of tons, or not thousands of tons, thousands of kilograms. So they can produce several tons. So you could supply a small meat shop, for example, or a canteen where everybody can taste it and enjoy it on daily basis, kind of. But you never reach something that a meat processor would use to produce all his products from. So for really reach this millions of tons of material, we need way more than 5 years. You can be sure about that. But for reaching the first pilot plant where a meat processor can make his first pilot product for putting into the shelves, this is something what we really aim to have that in 2025.
Which is 4 years. So when I say 3 to 5 years, you guys are saying 4 years. Awesome. One thing that sort of might be relevant to that, as with all markets, you can produce certain quality at scale. And often if you want to produce a different quality or a higher quality or something that's more desirable, it requires either more time or different processes and smaller volumes, right? It doesn't always work out that way, but it can. So I'm guessing that, is there a way, for example, by 2025, i.e. in 4 years' time, that you guys are not necessarily looking to produce, mincemeat that is, inexpensive and sort of just run-of-the-mill meat? Or are you guys going to be focusing more on sort of higher perceived value meat, which has a higher price point and higher margin? So do you guys have, or will this industry have the capability of creating, Wagyu beef, which has a high perceived cost for people, and people are prepared to pay high prices because of the kind of consumption experience of Wagyu versus standard beef, if there is such a thing? Do you see this industry, cell-based cultured meat, being first and foremost, because of scale, focused on the sort of higher value meat with higher prices? Is that the way to go from a scale perspective?
There are definitely companies that look at it at this way. We're doing it differently. We're really aiming for want to supply the market for convenient food, for highly processed food. So this is why our customers are the meat processors. So they want to produce all the food you're taking up daily. They don't want to sell you the Wagyu filet or something like that. And we don't want to do that either. We could do that possibly maybe 10 years later. We definitely don't exclude it from our processes when we learned how to scale, how to produce that in masses. But we see that it's very, very difficult to produce these thick tissues supplied with nutrients in a scalable, cost-effective manner. So we just focused on, okay, what can we do with existing technology, which we can modify with our experiences, and then make a good product that we stand for. And later on, we see what we can learn from what has been taken on our side and what has happened outside of our company, and combine all these informations to maybe make even better products.
Perfect. Okay, so you guys are going to be focused on the larger scale, sort of more regular meat that an average meat food processor will want to sell. What's been the response of the meat companies that you've spoken with, potential partners in meat processors and so on, or even just the industry? How is the traditional meat industry responding to, what you guys are doing?
I would say that the traditional meat business completely, I would say they're looking differently at us. Basically, our potential customers are very, very happy with that. because basically they're having since a long time that issue sitting between two chairs. So basically the meat processor is selling its raw product from the slaughterhouses, and the slaughterhouses are of course dependent on the animals that they have. We have seen, for example, an issue with African swine flu around the whole world. So the prices for the raw product of meat of animals has increased drastically. So the prices for the raw product of slaughtered meat of the raw product increased, and meat processors had to pay higher prices for their product. But they couldn't hand that price over to the groceries, to the markets, because these prices are negotiated years in advance and are very, very tough negotiated. So they are sitting between these two chairs, having to pay more, can't sell their product more expensive, so they're losing a lot of money in there. So they are looking for alternatives. Where can I get my raw product? And this is where we jump in. And so basically they are very, very happy to see that opportunity. They're really interested to support us, to help us develop the product in the direction they would like to have it, and they need it, of course. And this makes us very happy because we are not from the side of the meat processors, and we can get a lot of knowledge from them, which helps to make a very good product in combination. Of course, if you see that the slaughterhouses maybe are not that open-minded yet for our side, but we always try to make them aware that we don't want to crash down the complete meat industry and tell them, okay, everything you have did is bad and meat is bad in general. For example, I eat meat and I like meat. I try to reduce the amount of meat I eat, and I try to eat high quality meat when I do it. But I like meat, and I would like to have the farmers. We're based here in Rostock in the very northeast of Germany, where a lot of farmers are living and working. And we don't want to take all their jobs and say, okay, everything you have done your whole life is really bad and mean. This is not what we're thinking. So we want to coexist with conventional meat, and so the slaughterhouses will ever exist. So that we don't think that cell-based meat will completely exclude conventional meat from the world for a long time.
Okay, I didn't realize you were a meat eater. That's the end of this. No, I'm just kidding. So one of the things that I've been grappling with is what happens to those. Let's say, for example, that cell-based meat, cultured meat, does over the next 10, 15, 20 years take up an increasing percentage of meat production. I don't know that it necessarily needs to mean that those meat producers, those slaughterhouses and so on, the companies that are driving and employing people in that way can't take on board this model, your model, the innocent meat model of sort of creating meat in a new way. We've got farming communities around the world. We've got rural communities that are driving the food production of all of our countries. They are literally the people we rely upon from a food perspective, farmers and related, and all the way through the supply chain. Just because this is a new way doesn't mean that those people can't be the center of this new model. Just like they were the center of the old model, doesn't mean the jobs need to disappear. Now, obviously, the need to have somebody butcher an animal and dissect an animal is one thing, but those people could be re-employed in new ways. There are parts of this business model that you're going to be responsible for scaling, which requires not just scientists, but business people and meat processors and people that take that solid piece of meat or the kind of meat that you guys create and decide, dissect it up and pack it and do all the things you've traditionally done with meat, right? Or am I just sort of in a fantasy land?
No, you're totally right. Of course, I think we can really create some kind of new jobs and of course existing jobs. So transitioning farmers to different parts. For example, of course, the cells that we grow also need to be feeded. So you still need the farmers that grow plants outside. which we feed to ourselves. So we don't exclude them completely. Of course, we have to pack our material for sanding like every other food product in the world. We have to people run the factories. We have to have people that are driving the materials around. We have to have technicians that support the meat processors with our hardware. We have to feed a whole supply chain that I mentioned earlier with people that are working inside of that supply chain. We need to have extensive developers that are organizing and developing IT system that can run the system as automated as possible and as kind of controlled and sustainable as possible, so that it doesn't break down from every day. So there are a lot of things that we need to consider, and I basically don't believe, of course, some jobs will be transited, so people maybe have to work in a different field than they had before. But this is something that will appear in a lot of industries in the upcoming years, as we have to change a lot due to climate change and other factors that come in the near future.
Yeah, we've been on at Big Idea Ventures. We've been working on in the background sort of a fund which is focused on what we call rural partners, so the rural community, because there's been this sort of future of food expectation that as we kind of move forward with new technologies, we will sort of urbanize our food system and move it to Brooklyn and Berkeley and the center, the kind of food centers, or rather sort of urban centers, LA, Chicago, New York, etc. I and other people that sort of are in this space and know and sort of are get engaged realize that the food basket, or the kind of rural communities who have supported us for decades / centuries, will continue to be the places of food production at scale for centuries forward. And if we can give them the tools, if Innocent Meat with your technology can give them the tools to be the food producers of the future, that's how it is probably going to need to be. Those people who are employed in the food production industries today will probably continue to be the centers of food production of the future. So we should obviously consider how we do that and make it sort of thoughtful. But from our point of view, there's this and it's an interesting intersection. There's this connection between great universities where they're really sort of pushing the kind of envelope of a lot of this technology and science. Companies like your own who are really kind of pushing the envelope as well in this area, and then business people and rural communities, and sort of bringing all of that together to kind of create a future food system. I don't know. I'm sort of this whole area is just fascinating to me.
It definitely is. Yes, I'm totally with you there.
I should have finished that with a question, shouldn't I? Why don't I do this, because I know that I sort of begged you for some time for today, and we've already spent an hour talking, and I'm sure people are sort of arriving at their destinations if they're listening to this in the car, or their jog on their Peloton jogging machine is probably coming to an end. So in terms of Innocent Meat, where do people find out more about Patrick and Laura and the team? How do they engage with you? And what kind of support and help are you looking for from different folks?
Basically, we have a website, innocent-meat.com. So there you find
innocent-meat.com.
It's minus. Yes, innocent-meat.com.
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's a German translation. I'm not sure what that means. Do you have the word minus, or do you have a dash?
Yes, it's dash. It's basically a dash.
Okay, in the US, we would call that a hyphen. So innocent-meat, MEAT, or meats?
Meat, MEAT.
Okay, .com. And we'll put that in the show notes. I think we will. I'll ask somebody to do that. Maybe they'll listen to me. Innocent-meat.com. And I'm guessing you're on LinkedIn and other places?
Yes, we're both on LinkedIn. We're happy to connect with you. On our website is also our mail address at Hello Innocent Meat. You can write us. We're totally open for all discussions, for collaboration with scientific partners, with public institutes, but also with companies in every aspect that could be interested, from food processing to chemical engineering to hardware preparing machines. We're totally open. If you're interested into that field, reach out to us. We're always happy to discuss possibilities, share what we can share, of course, and discuss about all that systems we're using.
Okay, so that's where people can find out about your company. Where do they find, and I'm going to spell this for people's benefit, Patrick Nonnenmacher, so Nonnen, M as in mother, Acher. Where can they find Patrick? LinkedIn again?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. The easiest way. Reach out there to me. Just link to me, write me a short message, and I will definitely get back to you.
Fantastic. And you're looking for, and I'm putting words in your mouth, tell me if this is right and wrong, people in the meat industry who are interested in what you're doing, potential investors who are interested in what you're doing, potential employees that are looking to get involved in this category. I mean, do you have a shout out for any of those things?
We are always open to discuss with all of the three categories you talked about. Of course, always getting fresh minds into our team is something really cool. Growing together in a beautiful city here in Rostock with a very, very cool topic, being at the very state-of-the-art technology in a very cool field in food science. Something really cool. Also, from the investor side, we are always open to discuss, to take you with us on a very exciting journey, being part of a real cool project to change, make a real deep impact in the world. So definitely on that side, and for every institute that is interested in collaborating, is always open to discuss with us.
Perfect. And your co-founder is Laura Gertenbach, which is Laura, Laura, Gertenbach, Gertenbach. I'm guessing she's on LinkedIn as well, right?
Absolutely. You can
Awesome.
also reach out to her. Happy to hear from you.
Fantastic. So last question, last thoughts on Innocent Meat and, you know, what the future's all about. Where are you taking this?
I hope we summarized what we want to do in the upcoming years. So basically, we're really happy to be in all that field, to take part in everything we can. We have nearly every day so many very interesting discussions with other people from that field, new people coming into that field. So we're really open for discussions. We want to drive that field, not only our company. We really want to succeed in making this processes, making that product and bringing it to the customers, because we really deeply believe that it's something very beneficial for all of us.
Now all we need is the politicians to deregulate this in other parts of the world apart from Singapore, so that we can actually start selling this stuff to people and making a difference. So if there are any politicians listening, although they probably won't, probably got other things to do, get on it, guys. This is something we need to deregulate as soon as possible. All right, Patrick, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your work and Laura's work on Innocent Meat. I think you guys are doing amazing things. I'm really looking forward to the future that you're helping to create. Thank you so much. I'm going to press pause and then we're going to be off. Okay.
Thanks a lot for your time. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Patrick. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Patrick from Innocent Meats. By all means, reach out to him or Laura. And if you've got any questions, comments, suggestions, please do reach out to them. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. By all means, add any questions or comments to the video if you have the ability to, wherever you're listening or watching this. Obviously, if you're driving a car or something, don't put yourself at risk. But still love to hear from you when it's safe for you to reach out. All right, my name is Andrew Ive. I'm your host for today, and I'm the founder of Big Idea Ventures. By all means, reach out to me via bigideaventures.com, LinkedIn, or any of the other ways that you can do so. Please do like and subscribe, and we will tell you about next week's podcast as soon as it's available, so you can listen to that one. If you've got any suggestions about people we should talk to, please do reach out to us via bigideaventures.com and the contact us section. All right, this is Andrew signing off from the Big Idea podcast, where we're focused on food. Thank you.